Okay, welcome. Officially welcome. My name is Pia Smith, and I will be the host and moderator for this today's talk from Marté J. Matthews. This is a part of the San Francisco Mensa speaker series, and we have a great speaker today. Marté is a licensed marriage and family therapist with special interest in gifted and talented and twice exceptional youth, and she has personal experience with them too. She has been a SENG model parent group facilitator and a board member to California Association for the Gifted. She is currently the clinical director of Child and Family Counseling Group in San Jose. It's a pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Marté J. Matthews.
Thank you so much, Pia. If there's any problems with the volume, I really appreciate the invitation to come speak for the San Francisco Mensa. So the program today is on bringing out the best in your gifted child. And the target audience, the intended target audience for this program would be for parents, aunts, uncles, grandparents, and others who love and care about very bright kids, for parents and grandparents and loved ones of children and teens. And I'd like to start off by saying that being gifted is really only one part. Being talented is really only one part of so much of who a person truly is and who they will become. I wanted to start off with a definition many of you may already be familiar with about what giftedness means. And this comes from the Columbus Group in 1991. And I'd like to share the statement first, and then we'll take a closer look at the different components of the statement. So we'll start with the statement from the Columbus Group about what giftedness is. We'll talk more about the complexity and variance, and then we'll talk about motivation and how to really bring out the best in a gifted young person. Giftedness, according to the Columbus Group, 1991, is the asynchronous development in which advanced cognitive ability and heightened intensity all combine to create inner experiences and awareness that are qualitatively different from the norm. This asynchrony increases with higher intellectual capacity, and the uniqueness of the gifted renders them particularly vulnerable and requires modifications in parenting, in teaching, and in counseling in order for them to develop optimally. So within that one introductory paragraph from the Columbus Group, there's really a treasure trove. Let's break down some of the jargon that they've included. So giftedness is asynchronous development. Asynchrony is the unevenness of the various areas of talent, intellect, intensity, and interest. And it is the asynchrony increases with higher intellectual capacity. And that means that the individual whose intellectual capacity is closer to the 99.9th percentile will find themselves with many more asynchronies or unevenness than someone who is in the 98th or 99.0 percentile. So the asynchrony increases with higher intellectual capacity. Giftedness is not only advanced cognitive ability, but also heightened emotional intensity. Some of you may know some people that you care about, some children or teens who tend to be a little intense and wonder, why in the world is this going on? And it is in the hard wiring. Along with the advanced cognitive ability come emotional intensities. And this combination with the advanced cognitive ability and intensity combines to create inner experiences and awareness that are qualitatively different from the norm. If we consider the norm to be the bulk of the bell curve, the 50th percentile, give or take one standard deviation, giftedness is by its very definition not within one standard deviation of the norm on the bell curve, of the mean. And because those maybe out on the wings of this bell curve will have qualitatively different experiences than those who are within the bulk of the bell curve. The uniqueness of the gifted renders them particularly vulnerable, which is an interesting statement that I very much appreciate from the Columbus group, because it speaks to the vulnerability within the subjective experience, and that modifications are often necessary. What works for parents of kids who are much more within the norm may not work at all for parents of gifted kids in very similar situations. So there are modifications in parenting, in teaching, and in counseling that are required to help individuals to develop optimally. So there's quite a bit of complexity and variance within that identification of giftedness. So, for example, we might be gifted in terms of math, science, or language, which are the areas that are often identified by academic institutions. Schools will frequently test for linguistic giftedness or do some kind of mathematical or pattern recognition testing in order to test to see if they're gate, right? However, a gifted individual can also have exceptional talent or appreciation for nature, for music, for art, or even social, emotional, or intrapersonal development. All of these can be areas of exceptional skill. Most gifted and talented individuals have one or a few specific strengths. So we can all appreciate a very talented musician, a very capable mathematician, a gifted writer, a passionate artist, a brilliantly intuitive teacher. Very few individuals, though, are globally gifted. Most will be gifted within just a couple of areas, sometimes even only one. And very few people are globally gifted, meaning somebody who might be very socially adept, a scholar athlete with a passion for music who is also a gifted painter. There's just very few of those, right? Most people are going to be gifted in only one or two areas. Gifted persons can also experience learning disability or learning difference, such as a very slow processing speed. And gifted persons can also have specific special needs. For example, autistic spectrum or an anxiety disorder. And these folks who have both advanced intellectual capacity, probably an emotional intensity, and a special need, these are what is summed up within the label of twice exceptional. Someone who is cognitively very advanced in some ways, but may have special needs in any number of other areas. This variance is all included under that umbrella term of gifted, despite the fact that many of these children will often feel anything but the best and the brightest. The subjective experience can often be of magnified difficulties, magnified disparities. Gifted children are often highly sensitive observers of themselves and also others, and can draw very harsh conclusions about their own capabilities, and can be harsh towards others as well. Every person, in addition to their intellectual capacity, carries their own complex set of temperamental characteristics. And temperament is actually a collection of 9 traits. We think of temperament as being how moody someone is. It's much more complicated than that. The 9 characteristics of temperament have to do with someone's activity level, their level of physical motion and physical energy. Some people are naturally just a little more mellow. Other people are naturally very high energy. This has to do with their temperamental activity level. The next characteristic is on their internal regularity, their predictable responses to daily life, how easily they're able to fall into rhythms, whether they tend to get sleepy or wake up at the same time of day every day, or if that tends to vary quite a bit. The third characteristic is their initial reaction, their responses to new stimuli, responses to change. Many of us have kind of an instinctive no reaction to changes of plans, and others are kind of up for everything. And those initial reactions are something that is inborn, and through parenting, we can kind of soften the edges and bring self-awareness to some of these characteristics to help people in recognizing, oh, yeah, I just don't like change very much. I need to have a lot of information to help me, because I'm kind of slow to warm up when it comes to big changes. The fourth characteristic is adaptability, our own tendency to be flexible or more rigid in adjusting after that initial reaction we've just been talking about. And our intensity. Talking about intensity again, our responsiveness and our emotional energy, just how our engine runs. And then we get to mood, that trait that we think of when we think of the word temperament. But in terms of mood, some people tend to be look on the bright side kind of people. Some people, not so much, tend to have kind of a negative outlook. Some people tend to be a little bit more of a roller coaster, more labile. And some people are just kind of a little bit more laid back, kind of in between. The next characteristic for temperament is our distractibility, how easily sidetracked or how focused we naturally tend to be. The next characteristic, number 8, is our sensitivity. How much stimulation is needed to rouse a response, and how easily overstimulated do we tend to be? And the final characteristic is our persistence and attention span, our stick-to-itiveness. In the face of distraction, or when there are no distractions, how do we do once we're on a roll with really taking advantage and experiencing that flow? So every person carries their own temperamental characteristics. Just think, in a family of 4, you're going to have 4 completely different sets of those 9 characteristics, along with that emotional intensity and advanced intellectual capacity. So you add up the giftedness and the 9 characteristics of temperament, and then we begin to add in other factors: gender identity, our cultural values, the acculturation to the society that you inhabit, even birth order, your sibling relationships, your family's expectations. Multiply all these by a year of global pandemic and distance learning. This past year has been an extraordinary time for everyone. And with the extraordinary sensitivity and vulnerability of many gifted kids, some have really found ways to thrive, and others are really, really struggling. Family expectations and supportive reactions can have a powerful influence on motivation and how kids are going to be recovering over the next several years from the past year. So let's talk about motivation in bringing out the best in a gifted young person. Motivation is our internal drive to learn and accomplish tasks. It's an inborn attribute. It varies quite a bit, differs among individuals. So what I'd like to talk about are some of the ways that you can offer opportunities and get out of the way, because what we really hope is that we can tap into a person's internal motivation rather than trying to push someone along their path. I hope that from this afternoon's program that you'll be thinking about 2 ideas that you might take away. Which 2 ideas you choose are going to be entirely up to you, but 2 ideas that you might try with a young person in your family, a young person that you care about, even if they don't live with you. 2 things that maybe are new that you haven't tried before. So let's talk about some of the ways in which we accidentally sabotage motivation, and then we'll get to the good stuff about ways that we can promote motivation. So motivation depleters. Excessive failure. While everyone needs to learn how to be resilient, anyone who experiences a tremendous amount of adversity or failure is bound to become discouraged. Criticism is a motivation depleter. Sarcasm from loved ones, humiliation and shame. Some of these can be quite culturally bound. Here in the United States, these particular factors can be particularly difficult for a young person to cope with. The word sarcasm has as its root sakar, to sack, to pillage, to destroy. Sarcasm is often used by adults to try to maybe lighten the mood. With kids, it doesn't land that way. It is important for the adults around a young gifted person to be the child's ally and advocate and to support them through adversity. Save the sarcasm for appreciating when the child or teen is sarcastic, and save it for your adult relationships. It's not something that will help a young person. Paradoxically, praise can deplete motivation. It doesn't make sense initially, but let's talk about that a little bit more. The way that praise is given will determine how it lands. Excessive praise and very general praise tend to be less effective. So praise for better learning. You want to avoid general praise, the thanks for everything you've done. Really causes the listener to wonder, do you know what I've done? So a very specific kind of praise. I really appreciated how hard you worked on this project. Even that's still pretty general, but at least it shows you actually were paying attention. You're not just saying, thanks for everything you do. General praise leads some children to conclude that the recipient isn't doing well and needs additional pats on the back. Avoid praising for things they cannot control. So, for example, you're so smart. Danger zone there. You're so wonderful. You are so full of talent. These are not things that are under a child's control. So we'll be talking about more effective praise. Notice them for things that are under their control. So for example, with some kids, you might want to appreciate some really great risk-taking that they did. For kids who tend to play it very safe. On the other hand, for kids who are on the more adventurous side, who make a very careful choice, showing exceptional judgment, you want to choose that as your subject of praise. For working hard, for working for a long time, for their determination. On the other hand, for a young person who tends to work some very long hours and maybe get stuck and kind of spin their wheels, for those children, you would want to notice you took a break instead of trying to push through. And I noticed when you got back to work, then you had your spark back. That was a really good choice. Praise someone for changing their approach. Praise for changing or creatively solving a problem, for good effort, for sticking with it even when the work got hard. All of these things are things that are under a person's control. They have a choice about whether to do them or not. And when they are appreciated for making a great choice, they can look back and realize, oh, yeah, that worked better than my usual way of working. Okay, I'll try that again next time. And unfortunately, excessive screen time, which is something that we have all experienced during the last 14 months, can really deplete motivation. We get a lot of immediate gratification from something like video games. When we relax by doom scrolling, which is kind of an oxymoron, when we are doing things that, when we are excessively, passively consuming media, These are things that deplete our motivation for being able to move on and tackle something that's going to require some effort. I am recommending to all of the families that I work with in my practice to gradually begin making your lives more busy, adding in more and more variation as the state and the counties all begin to open up, so that you get a little too busy for all of that screen time. And to replace some of that screen time with meditation and other healthy ways to relax. So much better than doom scrolling. Let's talk some about some motivation builders. Ways that we can be talking with other people, children, teens, maybe even our spouse, would be talking about personal bests. Many gifted people are quite competitive. Many are not. But when we can be thinking in terms of our own personal best and what we've accomplished, and setting the next goals, what we are hoping to accomplish next. When we're able to have those conversations with loved ones, we're able to add a little fuel to that fire. Accomplishment and mastery are the most motivational and satisfying. So finding ways right now to break down those really big projects into smaller chunks. For kids, helping them to figure out with that final project this spring, what are going to be the chunks? How can you make progress on it this week? What could you do today? Breaking the larger projects down into smaller chunks, because as we accomplish each chunk and we climb those steps, each one of those gives us a little release of some of those feel-good hormones. I accomplished something today. Intrinsic rewards can be very, very satisfying and increase motivation. So anytime that the project that they might be working on is related to something that they have their own interest in, that's a way of helping to really tap into motivation. Rewards can be satisfying to a degree. I really encourage the families that I work with to think of rewards less as a thing or a food, and more in terms of time and attention and fun things with those we love. So if your child gets to pick one special thing to do with you on Sunday afternoon, that special time is a reward within itself. Extrinsic and material rewards are really kind of a last resort. They can risk even losing motivation for students who tend to be internally motivated. Sadly, the very well-intentioned reading contests in many communities can actually have a paradoxical effect on really strong readers. So what we will sometimes see is that a child who is naturally able to read far above their grade level, who really loves to read, will resort to reading, some of the leveled readers that they outgrew 2 years ago, because it shows they finished a book. So they get it signed off by the librarian so that they can add another book to their list, even if they didn't really get anything out of it. It's really so much more gratifying and rewarding to find an author or a series that that child dearly loves than to join a reading contest. Let's talk about a few other ways that a child or teen's loved ones can support their motivation and help bring out their best. Supporting your child's interests, even when they seem kind of pointless in the moment. We really can't tell how that kind of quirky interest they have now might actually develop into a passion, an interest, or maybe even a career later in life. So many of the careers that we have now were perhaps things that may not have even existed when you went to college. Certainly, between the time that I attended college and we were looking at colleges for my now 19-year-old, there were majors that I never had a choice of that sounded fascinating. New fields are being developed all the time. And fascination with playing in the water, that child might end up becoming a civil engineer. There's so many different careers, majors, and fields of interest. We really don't know how those child interests might end up developing in the future. I would caution you, though, from discovering that your child or teen's interest is something that you're really excited about too. Curb your enthusiasm, because a loved one can accidentally kind of overshadow a young person who may need a couple of extra months to get coordinated enough to really enjoy fencing. Or your child may discover computer coding. You may have a career in computer coding. Don't be offended if your child only wants your help a little bit, and then they're kind of off and running, doing their own thing. They need to be able to develop their expertise on their own without always having a hand from mom or dad. Pay attention to your young person's interests. Pay attention to what's important to them. Ask them about it. Listen. Reflect back. If you can, show them how maybe it relates to something in the wider world, to help them to see that this maybe quirky thing might be related to this larger thing, but be careful not to overshadow their newfound interest. Don't show off about all of the expertise that you have in it. Let them have their moment to shine. Appreciate diversity even within your own family. Different people are motivated in different ways by different things. Observe your own patterns of motivation and accomplishment, but appreciate that other people in your family may be similar in some ways and different in others. There's a phenomenon that many families will want to talk with me about, and that is when both of their children were perfectly happily involved in soccer, and the older child began to really shine and began moving up, joining a competitive league, and then the younger child lost interest entirely. This is very, very common and is a phenomenon known as disidentification. When one person in the family is taking up all the time, energy, and air around this one particular thing, being pretty good at it for your age just doesn't quite balance out. So we want to make sure that we're not trying to force both of our children into the same sport or to work with the same piano teacher for our convenience. This ends up being a real motivation drain. When each child is able to find their own sport, or the older one maybe shines in soccer and the younger one discovers a musical instrument or a foreign language, we want to give each one of the children their own space to be able to be motivated and really have their own thing, not trying to fit them in because it's super convenient to have both of those lessons on the same afternoon. Don't try to make your children fit into your mold or each other's. We all have a tendency to do more of what we love and avoid our weak spots. This is not the recipe for being a successful high school student, however. It's really important that adults around a young person challenge ourselves to try some things out where we're risking not being successful. Because you know what a high school student has to do all the time? Take really big risks. They're expected to be taking science, math, English language arts, history, a foreign language, and a visual or performing art. If they're lucky, they get to do half of those one day and half the next. Most students are expected to be doing all of those every single day. Very difficult to be spread that thin and be successful in every single one. As adults, we can be modeling that we're not depending on doing everything right from the very beginning for our ego. We can laugh at our own mistakes. This is such powerful modeling for a young person to see, all right, if I literally fall on my face, then at least I know mom and dad have done it before. They'll help. Rather than everybody in the family sticking with what is safest, what they're an expert in, and never taking any chances. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Albus Dumbledore shares his wisdom. It is our choices that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities. Make choices to take risks, not just encourage your young person to take risks. In a very large longitudinal study of underachievers, the authors were McCall, Yvonne, and Kratzer. It was published in 1992. It was found that 13 years after high school, that the educational and occupational status of underachievers through high school, those who didn't show their true potential, that their actual status 13 years later paralleled their grades in high school rather than their abilities according to testing. It's so important to model in your family. In our family, we take chances, and sometimes we fail and we figure out, how do we bounce back? Resiliency is important to be modeled within the family. Allow children to learn from the consequences of their own actions. This comes from academics, from social experiences, and from chores. Even gifted kids need some chores. They need some jobs around the house. They may need a wide variety. Novelty is something that so many gifted kids really thrive on. learning how to do new things and then demonstrating their expertise. But it is important for gifted kids to have experiences of success as well as risking falling on their faces. I urge parents to avoid being a snowplow parent and making things too easy for young people. Rather than going in and talking to the teacher yourself, talk with the young person about how they can advocate for talking with the teacher when the grade is not measuring up. Don't blame those things on the teacher. Help the young person to realize what was within their control, what opportunities were missed, and what can you do about it now. Tolerate some failure. While a young person is still at home, living at home while they're going to school, you can be their safety net. Teach young people how to learn from failure, to see it as a setback and a learning opportunity, not as a falling off the cliff experience. Susan Weinbrenner is an author and consultant on a wide variety of books for parents and teachers of gifted individuals. In her presentation in 2010 at the California Association for the Gifted conference, she talked about the fact that students who have never learned the benefits of struggle will never really know if they have reached their achievement potential. Students must learn the value of hard work and not be satisfied with high grades that came easily. Gifted students often observe very easy success and actually will then underestimate their own abilities, and self-doubt can creep in. Many gifted kids, when they get feedback about, wow, you're really smart, will actually begin to avoid the harder tasks. And they strive to make work look effortless by taking on projects that just don't require that much effort. I urge the loved ones of kids and teens who are gifted to avoid praise when children have achieved something with little or no effort. Parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, godparents who offer admiration for something that was too easy, they just look like they're easily impressed and kind of lose credibility. You want to ask the young person more about what did they learn from the project? What did they especially enjoy about the project? What did they get to choose? What was their part in a group project? Be curious rather than just say, hey, great job on that A. Might have been the easiest A they ever got. Children thrive when they are loved for themselves, not just their accomplishments. Demonstrate love and approval for the whole person your child is, not just what they do. Admire their process, admire their growth, ask them questions and listen. Provide a nurturing environment that values individual differences. Research and encourage compensation strategies for learning differences and disabilities. Encourage awareness of one's own strengths as well as weaknesses. Welcome the child to teach you something that you didn't know before, and if you did, keep your mouth shut about it. Do not ignore the weak spots. Don't avoid speaking about them. Don't pretend that they're not there. Ask the young person about ways that they're learning to work around and work with their own unique combination of strengths, weaknesses, intensity, and temperamental characteristics. I encourage you to find a way to sit and just listen to your child one-on-one for 10 minutes every day. It seems like it's a pretty small thing to try to do. It actually takes a lot of work from everyone to do it. But 10 minutes of not distracted, electronics-free, one-on-one time to just talk about life. Whether it's sitting across the table or preparing dinner together, or maybe going for a drive in the car. Find out the best ways to engage your child or teen in a conversation, what helps them to be most comfortable. And during these conversations, resist the temptation to give advice. Ask curious questions, not leading questions. Use active and reflective listening, highlighting the feelings that they're conveying and the main ideas so that they know that they're truly being listened to. Because this is one of the most important things you can do to bring out the best. I hope that in the last several minutes that I've shared many ideas that you'll be excited to try with your family. I hope that you have at least 2 wonderful takeaways of things that you would like to try not doing anymore, or maybe 2 things that you'd like to incorporate and try with a young person in your family. Thank you so much for your kind attention today.
Thank you so much, Marté. This was super interesting. We have a couple of questions. You said that screen time reduces motivation, but what about interactive games and social interactions via computer?
Social interactions via computer are the only way we have social interactions right now. And so I do understand that on a very deep level. And when a person spends 10 hours staring at a screen, interacting in a virtual environment, there are some limitations to that experience. And there are a lot of other things that they haven't done during those 10 hours. So yes, until we begin to open up, many of our social experiences will continue to be virtual. However, going out for a walk in the fresh air and sunshine, going out to a local park is a very safe activity so long as it is not an overcrowded environment, even in the age of COVID. And it provides for a qualitatively different experience from playing Minecraft for 3 hours straight or World of Warcraft. They're a completely different experience. And I'm not saying that we should spend 10 hours out in the sun at a local park. We all need to work on regaining some balance between our electronic experiences and our relearning how to have safe face-to-face experiences. The other important point that the question brings up, though, is there is a tremendous difference between scrolling around and passively consuming social media and creating. When we're creating levels in a game, when we are programming, when we are editing videos, when we are creating online, we're stimulating other parts of our brain. And that can really boost some motivation When we finish a project that we're working on, whether that's on paper or online, it's a very satisfying experience. But it's entirely different from being on YouTube for the last 3 hours and passively consuming that media. We all need to work very hard for ourselves and for the young people in our families to recalibrate the balance and find the things that we used to do and used to enjoy and get back out and do them. Sadly, because of the somewhat sedating effects and the immediate gratification to our reward centers, pleasure centers of our brain, sometimes the first few times we get out and do something that we might have ordinarily enjoyed after screen time, it feels a little lackluster. One family that I worked with, we were able to come up with the metaphor. Screen time is a little bit like Flamin' Hot Cheetos. A lot of people love them. I hate them, so it's not a great analogy for me, but it worked really well for this kid. So after eating a bag of Flamin' Hot Cheetos, you kind of like your threshold for flavor is set pretty high. So if what you're trying to eat next is maybe an apple or a sandwich, it's just not that exciting. But Flamin' Hot Cheetos are full of empty calories and not a lot of nutrients. There's a parallel there with passive consumption and screen time. We need to, and I'm not saying that nobody ever should get to eat Flamin' Hot Cheetos. If that's your thing, have a handful on your plate. But it's about balance, right? And passively consuming screen time hour after hour leaves the rest of the world a little bland. We need to be able to recalibrate and truly enjoy the face-to-face interactions, getting out in nature, and doing the regular things too.
So there's another question here. Scroll up. Can you say some more about the praise for achievement versus the praise for effort?
Sure. So praise for effort is really about praising the process that the person had some control over. Praise for achievement is not necessarily something that the individual has a lot of control over. For any of you who have ever participated in a class that was graded on the curve, you know what I mean. So we want to ask more about the achievement. It may be that the achievement is thoroughly praiseworthy. It may be that it was the easiest day they ever got. We don't know what it is about the accomplishment that is really worthwhile without asking more questions and learning more about it. But even seeing a young person get really excited to tell you about their project, you can say, I can see how excited you were about this project from the tone of your voice and the excitement in your eyes. And that really helps someone to feel seen.
And I have another question. Many of the things that you said are useful for educators too. Do you have any other specific advice for educators of gifted students?
Well, I mentioned Susan Weinbrenner, who's an absolutely fantastic speaker and author of books for parents as well as educators. I think that really working to find students' strengths and understand their weaknesses and help a young person to understand, not just feel bad about their strengths and weaknesses is vital in an educational setting. And for any kind of a pair project, a dyad project or group project, to really think very, very carefully about the other students that would be paired with a very bright or gifted or talented student, because that experience can be so tremendously frustrating for all parties concerned.
Then I have a question about if students in, for instance, Montessori schools and schools like that do better in school and life.
Oh, that's right. That's a wonderful question. I know our family was a Montessori family for some number of years as well, and I think it really depends on the unique needs of the student. There are many very bright kids who really thrive in a Montessori environment where maybe they're still using the sandpaper letters, but their building capacity with the pink cubes or the beads is kind of infinite, right? So I think that for many students, Montessori education can be a wonderful foundation. I have worked, though, with any number of students who have really struggled to really shine in a Montessori environment. I think it's really about the goodness of fit. We've been talking about how complicated every individual can be. And as convenient as it can be to have both of your children attend the same school, be that a Montessori school or not a Montessori school, it's not that uncommon actually to have two siblings who need very different educational environments. So I wish it was as simple as Montessori is the best for everyone. I don't think that's always the case, but I've certainly known quite a few young people in my own life that have really thrived in a Montessori environment.
So I think I have to cut there. We've gotten the full hour. I didn't get to all the questions. The time went really fast. So again, I want to very much thank you, Marté Matthews, for this Sunday's talk.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I very much appreciate the invitation.